Yep. And I didn't flip it around this time. What's up, people?
Crash Course Philosophy.
I'm watching a video. Free will, compatibilism, and determinism. Boom, now we're right. With my homie, Matthew George. So yeah, we're just chopping it up. In conversation, really a topic that, man, has come up so many different times for me. Different times, different ways, and for different reasons. And so, yeah, as we always do, Matthew and I are chopping up about a lot of things. So we're just kicking it today, chopping up about this. So it's so many things, right? So free will means so many different things to different people, and there's different definitions. I'm not even gonna hash them out. We're not even gonna hash them out right now. We'll get into some different things, but I say that because a lot of people mean different things by the term free will, you know. And so you have different terms like libertarian free will and some of these other things where people are just talking about like the point at which we have choice, or you know, and like where are we making a choice? Where are we making it from? Are we really making a choice that's not influenced? Is that even possible? If so,
or is it even advisable, right?
Even if it's advisable, yeah.
I derailed your thought process.
No, that
there.
was good. That was
no, I
perfect.
mean, if you make decisions without taking into account all the factors that could have influenced which decision you made,
right, then
you might be making a bad decision. So evolutionarily, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, that's what we're going to find out in a few minutes. You know, I mean, it definitely could be true. There's so many things that are meant by free will, and it's actually a topic that a lot of people talk about regularly. I think it's an important topic because it really does come down to us understanding like how we think, our behaviors, and how much we are in control of and not in control of, and where does our responsibility lie, you know. And I think the more we talk about this kind of thing, the more we understand like how to work with ourselves and how to work with each other and what we're actually dealing with.
Well, I could also say that the more we think about those types of things, the less we understand, because we further ourselves from our animal instincts, which we're all animals anyway, but when we artificially created a society based on the agrarian model,
okay,
then we...
You're going deep, all right, you jumping.
That's right, I'm jumping to the deep end. Then we take ourselves away from what our nature was in the first place. So the more we actually think about it, the less we are connected to our true selves. And I think that's the reason a lot of people feel like they're in a state of mental imbalance and often in need of medication and therapy and stuff like that to cope with those cognitive dissonances.
Well, I find that I definitely understand what you're saying. I think the thing I find most interesting about what you said is when you use the term like who we are. And I would say the one thing about what you said that struck like a different chord with me is the who we are. There is no such thing as who we are. There's always just a becoming. It's all like evolution is always continuing on. So even though, like you're saying, and I can totally agree with you, we have certain kind of animal instincts, certain like primal kind of urges or inclinations or tendencies. While that's the case, like we're always continuing to evolve, you know, and especially with this damn brain of ours, like we're always continuing to evolve to actually think differently and kind of be differently based on just evolving, man.
Do you think devolving is ever possible, or is it always evolving regardless of whether the change results for good or for bad?
That's a good question. Okay, I think to me by the definition of the word evolution, like not it being used in a sense where there's some kind of like some kind of personal opinion like put in there, like meaning that like if I think about what's valuable to me, I could say that certain actions that were done back in the day versus now, I might take, and I'm just use a quick vague kind of thing, but I could take an action and say by what's important to me, I don't think we're evolving. I think we're devolving by continuing that action or by going back to that, what have you. But that would be me, understandably, like talking about in some way, even in an indirect way, what's personally valuable to me, right? So
well, sometimes it's not just personal. It could be like objectively verifiable, for example, through statistics.
It can be, but ultimately, though, I think the word evolve and devolve could be used in different ways, and I think this is, I guess, why I was going here first before I completely answered your question. Right? It's like if we're talking about evolving or devolving with the respect of goals, that's one question. If we're talking about evolution as in just like things changing and adapting to whatever it is at the time, I don't think there's a such thing as devolving, because
I would disagree with that statement.
I got you. Let me tell you why I say that. I only say that because like evolution and of course this is me just like saying this, not knowing, like having a grasp on evolution, like a basic like understanding, but of course not being an expert on it. But I'm saying that to say, when I think about the root of what evolution is, it's just a process of change that's based on whatever the circumstances are at that time, right? And then species or whatever, like things adapting to what that is.
That's how you're defining the term evolution?
Well, I'm thinking about what it is. So meaning like when we look at what evolution is, and maybe this is a point where we could have like, I could say like, is this what you understand it as, or is this what we're talking about? So
well, I would answer that actually by saying that if you think about Charles Darwin, he wasn't thinking about de-evolution.
For sure.
He was only thinking about evolution, but then I think that...
And he was only thinking about it in, like,
in the way that you're describing, I would say, how things change. But then I think that now that human beings have had a chance to evaluate their own behaviors, that they're more apt to identify the behaviors that result in negative consequences in the future and label those as de-evolution as opposed to evolution.
For sure, with respect to a goal, though, right? Which is
or like an objectively verifiable statistic, which is what I said earlier.
True. Okay, so
like drug use, for example, like the pain medication epidemic that we're experiencing right now, that could be cited as an example of a de-evolution where people their bodies physically become dependent upon pain medications that eventually like ramp up to the point where they're unsustainable, and then the person has some sort of a meltdown and then they die. Like dying is not the goal, it's survival. So to me that's an example of de-evolution.
Okay, I could definitely understand that.
And Jordan Peterson, he recently underwent a psychiatric difficulty in terms of like severe depression. That there's a few videos on YouTube that his family members have posted about it, like how he's trying to cope with it and everything. And I think that's an example of how and this is coming back to like if you get further away from what our nature is as an animal, and you start to think more of that we have a soul, this concept of duality.
Okay.
It actually removes you farther from what allows you to live a peaceful and happy life, to the point where you're just filled with like anxiety and stress, and you're not able to sleep or like digest food well or be in a mental state that's conducive to like peace and tranquility.
Well,
so thinking is de-evolution in this instance that I'm explaining to you.
So that's interesting, especially because you went the direction of the soul piece and that kind of thing. And of course I got a million thoughts about that and how like it can lead in some places to definitely not be helpful for our thinking. But I would say, I can't actually vouch for that though. And it's only because it's like that concept, even the concept of a soul, the concept of like that whole, I won't even like go down the path of like naming everything, but everything in that direction is not new for us. It's not like we just started that shit. Like, even I think about some of our most what I guess I would consider, by based on where we are now, primitive, cultures in certain ways or what have you, that, their thought processes about it, first of all, is where a lot of it started, because it's just a progress of the same thought. But then also, it was just as present, while they were still being more so closer to their, what I think you might be describing as the
What was still present? You lost me, I'm sorry.
The concept of a soul, the concept of these other things that you were saying, it would lead to, you said that would lead to not having peace and tranquility. And while
I didn't say it had anything to do with the soul. I was saying that overthinking, like thinking very hard, that leads to problems. So we would think objectively, like the harder you think, the better ideas you're going to be able to come up with, and the better your life will become as a result. But there's evidence to the contrary, which is that sometimes if you start thinking really hard, you start observing these irreconcilable dualities in life that just cause you to feel sadness, for example, or like stress or anxiety, and then ultimately lead to like you're less evolutionarily benefited by that than someone who just ignores it, for example, and tunes into a Ravens game.
Well, so now you're talking about something, and actually this was what I was mentioning to you a few minutes ago. In my psychotherapy class, we learned about disassociation, and I had never heard of it in this definition, where they were basically talking about a healthy sense of disassociation is being able to live in a way where you're not thinking about all the threats, all the things that could possibly happen. You're not overthinking life, and how we need, like, not only we need that, but that's a natural part of what we do. That's how we live. And I was just mentioning this to someone the other day about, like, driving in traffic, like driving on the highway. Like, driving period is dangerous. Like, the line is not a barrier. It's just a line. There's a car literally.
Yeah, you hope somebody respects it.
Or that they're paying attention, all these kind of things. So, but if you thought about the fact that while just driving from here to the market or driving from here to the other side of town, you were going to pass 200 speeding cars, if you overthought that, you might not drive, right? So I do agree with you on that. But at the same time, on the flip side, I kind of disagree with it. Or at least I feel like, I won't say I disagree with it, that's not the word. I feel that it's true. I don't feel that ultimately is always true, because no matter where we were in time, I would argue we were always thinking to some deep level, like just with what we were dealing with at that time. So meaning, like, you think about something like astrology. To me, astrology comes from deep thinking regularly, overly obsessing about the stars and that kind of thing, or at least focusing on it so much. Now, I do agree, and this is what I was saying, like, I do agree with you, I don't disagree. I do agree that there are some cases, because I've faced it myself. Like, it's something that I actually work with myself regularly with, just like being, like, having a whole lot going on in my head, some of which has to do with, like, actual responsibilities and obligations. Some have to do with things I've taken on, but they all equal this, and I'm like, and it causes me anxiety, and I have to escape from it, and I have to be kind of, I think, and even in the direction you're starting to talk, we haven't talked about, like, actual things or activities or how to do that, but it definitely goes away from overthinking and trying to be more present and just, be more in touch with things that I think, to me, reverts, because it goes back in time with some of these other things that we've, created and had more of a reason to think deeply about. It does allow me to get out of my head about those kind of things. But at the same time, though, if I look at somebody premature to this time, they might not have had all these distractions and might not have had as many things as I have to think about, but they did at the same time in their circumstances, because maybe something like, instead of having a home and a structure like this where it was so well made, they didn't have to think about it. They were thinking about it, on a more consistent basis because it wasn't as secure. So I almost feel like I do agree with you, but I believe the only way we got to this point to even have this conversation is to the ebb and flow of what it means to think deeply about things, to obsess, and sometimes to be unhealthy, and other times it lead us to like the most monumental breakthroughs in how to enjoy your life as a human being, you know.
Well, there's benefits and there's downsides, and I think the concept of thinking has a scale of benefit that it starts off being very non-beneficial if you don't use your brain at all, and then also non-beneficial if you use your brain way too much, but somewhere in the middle there's like a happy medium. Yeah. One example I could talk about when you mentioned that people's primitive dwellings used to require a lot more maintenance, and I also used to repair some hand-built natural buildings in the Czech Republic when I was there.
Oh wow!
So you're preaching to the choir on that point, but what I would say now is that we've gotten to the point where we can build houses reliably that typically don't leak a lot of water through the roof, and they don't blow down unless you're in a hurricane or something like that. But what we did with our spare time then, now that we didn't have to worry about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, including basic shelter, was that we invented, for example, artificial technologies and intelligence that one could argue have actually made life a little bit worse in certain cases. I would cite the example that one of the basic needs that people have is to socialize with other people. And sometimes when that need goes unmet, there's other consequences that result from that, like people stop caring about people that they don't know about, or people that, for example, may not resonate with on a personal level because they don't look the same or they don't have the same beliefs or something like that. So interacting with people socially is very important, but the technology that we created from all the free time that we benefit from resulting from the ages of development has actually resulted in something that's causing society to sort of crumble at its foundation.
So that's definitely one of those points where I feel like it's what you said a few minutes ago, which is like there's hardcore pros, hardcore cons, there's hardcore truth to it. I mean, there's truth to what you're saying, but I also feel like the converse is true too. So I mean, we're literally we're in the midst of it right now, you know. Like this is actually, and I'm gonna explain even in more detail like what I mean, but I'm writing a book on that's called Social Media Etiquette, right? Social media etiquette.
Do you think that deserves an entire book?
Hell yeah. That deserves not only a book, man, that deserves a college course.
And why are you the right person to be writing that book?
I'm not. I'm just somebody who's just like, it just makes sense to me, so I'm going to just, anything that I can contribute. But the reason why I do feel is because, and it's really tailored to what you're saying, the one thing about these times is that we now have created a new technology that affords us some amazing, I mean, when I was 17 years old and I had an interest like music or conversation like this, there was no way for me to be able to share it with other people around the world who cared instantaneously. And not leave my home and be comfortable and not have to buy airtime somewhere and all these things. I didn't have the ability to hold a number of different conversations at a time where I can disseminate, you know, information to a good amount of people and get their feedback like that and be able to make decisions. There was a whole lot that I couldn't do. And so on the flip side, our brains, and I've talked about this a lot, on the flip side, our brains are not, it's still so new to us, right? That like psychologically, our brains are not used to handling this much, so it can become crazy overwhelming. And you're talking to like, golly, it can become crazy overwhelming, right? And then at other times, it's crazy liberating. Like it's the exact opposite. It's like, oh my gosh, it's the greatest because now this makes it easier to communicate. It has big pros and big cons, and so the reason why I'm even writing that, and it's not even I'm writing it like I'm gonna take the world by storm. I just realized as many conversations around this topic as possible is needed. in order to help us to take the technology that we have and to help it to not be what you're saying, or find other places where it is, correct those so that we can use it for the benefits and do our best to avoid like some of the real cons, right? It doesn't take the place of a social interaction at all. Like, yeah. And it does have cons as far as our psyche, where we're not used to working with things and it causes other anxieties. And that's why I think like with anything in life, it's really more so like studying it and studying ourselves to the point where we can understand how to get the benefits out of it and avoid the pitfalls as many as possible, right? So my social media etiquette lessons are, and it's funny, and for anybody, first of all, I forgot to say hello to everybody watching. Hello everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. And for anybody that's watching, like the lessons that I have, they're kind of funny, they're kind of silly, or not silly, they're comical and serious at the same time. So like one of the first ones is like, thou shalt not like write in all caps, unless dealing with in fact, I got it right here. I forgot, I could pull it right up here on the phone. Here we go. So right now I only have like maybe 5 on here, 4 or 5. Number 1, thou shalt not write in all caps unless posting a message of authentic emergency. After, of course, dialing 911. Reason, it's annoying as fuck. Same as if someone was standing in front of you shouting every word of every sentence every time. And that's the lesson, right? It's just, now, I'm having fun, but I know I'm talking about something serious though, because it is true that in the midst of a communicative environment, because of the fact that we've associated these symbols with meaning a particular thing, when people are just doing it all day, it can feel that way, right? Because we just haven't gotten used to it. So it might help. I mean, and it might not be that everybody does that, but at the same time, I'm realizing that in what you're saying and what I think are pros and cons, that we have to be mindful, right? And realize that, okay, this technology and a lot of other technology that we build, it definitely has its pros, but it definitely has its psychological cons too.
Do you think that the people who would be potentially reading your book would be the type of people who would desperately need that message, or do you think the people who need the message most would be the least likely to read your book?
That's a good question. I feel like everybody would need it.
Everybody will read it?
I feel like everybody would need it. Whether everybody would read it, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Yeah, nah. I feel like everybody needs it. But I say need loosely. I'm just saying, like, I think if nothing else, like, even like how here's the second one, right? And then I'm a further answer your question to illustrate this point, right? So number 2, excuse me, social media etiquette lesson. Oh no, this is 4. Well, I got 1. Okay, let's read this one. This one is, okay, all right, got it. So some people need to realize that no matter how many exclamation points they use or how many all caps you need to watch this ASAP statements they make, there's not enough time in a day, let alone in a lifetime, to watch every video, picture, or post that everybody sends. Unsolicited material is a nuisance, and I apologize to anyone who I've ever done that to without realizing it. We have to learn social media etiquette. Okay, here's one for you. This one is more like to the point of actual okay. Okay, so this one is, come on. Okay, the key to not getting frustrated on social media with the foolishness people put on social media is, number 1, mind your own damn business, right? And the only reason why I put that is, I mean, 1, I feel like it's true, but 2, it's simple, but I think it's a part of like not getting overwhelmed, not feeling some of this anxiety that we're talking about, because you have to be able to be disciplined with it and limit the amount of stuff that's coming at you or the amount of stuff that you are into, Number 2, Stop keeping up with every post of people that annoy you. And of course, that would also extend to like topics and things that annoy you. Like you have to guard your mind. In order for it to be healthy. Number 3, no matter how tempting, stop scrolling the news feed for countless hours. Number 4, enable manual add to timeline so that you can filter through when people tag you and that kind of thing. So a lot of this stuff is like, it's just the regular things that we do on social media. But the way I'm thinking about it is like, this is how you protect your mind. Like, this is how you work.
I think there's a few maybe things that I would add to that.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is that if you spend some time on social media, you could also have a counterpoint of time spent doing real activities with real people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to have at least a 1-to-1 ratio, you know?
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, that's one of the things about this time that I have a lot of empathy for us with, when it comes to like most of our interactions have to be virtual, because it doesn't allow us to complete the rest of the transaction that we would feel in a normal social environment, which would give us the satisfaction of that social connection. I did an article review about this article that was talking about Zoom fatigue, and this person was basically naming like a lot of these psychological things, like it's unnatural, it's hard for you to be in a conversation where you can never leave the point of view of the conversation. Like that can bring about a particular anxiety, right? It's not like a normal interaction where you can kind of be off somewhere listening where everybody's not able to or everybody's not looking in your direction, making you have to be self-conscious, or where you're looking at yourself the whole time that you're talking. So essentially this person was talking about like, this is some of the things that has led to some of the feelings that we felt. And I've experienced this, and a lot of people have, where, you have these interactions, especially like with Zoom, and then you feel this weird sense of like connection, but at the same time, like incompletion, right? But then in addition to that being what it is, then I flip it on its head though and say, well, this also develops a skill in us. It develops a skill. In my psychotherapy class, the very first thing that the teacher talked about when he was working with the first like demo session student was, he said, the one thing about this is that if I were in an office with you, there'll be certain things, there'll be certain visceral connections. He said, since I can't do that and I'm limited, I'm just gonna do the best I can. And because he's so like Zen-like, so to speak, in his approach, he like settled in a particular way where instead of letting it be a hindrance to him, he started finding ways to, in this medium, make the same connection.
I see. I had a question for you.
Yeah.
How do I know that my interaction with you right now isn't on a screen and it's some sort of like artificial creation in my brain, which is sitting in a glass jar somewhere with electrodes?
Brain in the vat. For everybody watching, that's called brain in the vat. Was it solipsism? I think the answer to that question is you don't. And then the next thing to me from there is like, well, what do you do with that?
I think that like I'm not saying I do feel this way, but I might feel that my interaction with you is I can't remember the two adjectives you used, but the second one was sort of like incomplete. What was the first one you used? Anyway, whatever it was.
It was a contrast to that though. It was a contrast to incomplete. Like
anyway, so the point is like, connection. So let's say that I felt like I interacted with you, or I interacted with another person, for example, who's not you, and I felt like there was an incompleteness about it. How would I know to differentiate that between the incompleteness that I feel when I'm interacting on Zoom? Like, how does that incompleteness differ?
I think it just depends on this. Wait a minute. What was the second scenario you mentioned?
I'm saying like you can feel incomplete digitally or in person.
Oh yeah. Well, the easy part. Okay, that's a good question. So basically, one way is incomplete is like, you can't feel a person breathe when you're talking to them. Like when you're like differently than being on the screen, you can't feel their presence. So they were talking about like the real simple things like the gestures, whether it's the body language or just how you feel the person, you feel their energy, you feel their breath. Like it's a visceral interaction. And you know, I guess one of the easiest ways to describe it would be the difference between watching a concert on virtual and being there. Like it's just a different experience where some of the most nuanced aspects of the interaction impacts you in a certain way. Not to mention actual physical touch and those kind of things.
Okay, so returning to the subject of evolution versus de-evolution.
Okay.
Let's say that my brain has been in a vat since the day I was born, or at least so I think.
Okay.
I think I was born. But the entire time the brain's been in the vat. And I've gotten these simulations of interactions with people such as yourself that have always maybe seemed a little bit incomplete. I'm not saying that in this case, but you know, in other cases maybe incomplete. But I've sort of devolved to the point where I can now accept that as a complete interaction because that's all I've ever known. So kids right now that are not able to go to school, like for the first time, for example, they've never known what it's like to interact with their classmates, like preschool, kindergarten, first grade, whatever age it is. So for them, they may actually like view that Zoom interaction as the totality of the human experience because they don't know anything else about it. And for them, that might be all that they actually do need. So if we get to the point where we're reintroducing people into a communal environment without all the barriers, then that might actually seem kind of overwhelming.
It could. You're absolutely right, man. I don't think that it would be though, because I think we have a longer history of our receptors in our body looking for the actual personal and social interaction.
Okay, but let me stop you there. Have you, since this has happened, have you had any negative experiences with people who feel like you're either too close or you don't have a mask on or somehow you've like infringed upon their space?
Yeah.
How would you say that relates to the previous statement then?
What, the statement of?
That people, they have this need for gregarious interactions, and so that's what they're going to be happy to go back to. Whereas I'm saying that right now, people are displaying these symptoms of antisocial tendencies that are being reinforced by like everything that we're seeing on the news and different segments of society that are behaving in different ways.
I think that the way that it relates is, I think it equals something that's mostly positive. So what I mean by that is, what I actually think happens is we still have the need to be social. We have the need to be close. But now, yeah, you're going to have some people that's just purely afraid and scared, but I believe the majority would just be more mindful. Just like, I respect your space more. I realize how much I can transmit things, so I'm taking care of my personal hygiene and myself. Well, you're being more mindful. When I was at this one place and I was coming through the door, there was this, I literally got into this niceness war with this kid because we both were like, no, you come through. And I was like, no, you come through. And as soon as I was walking through the door, he did everything he could to jump out the way. And it was out of like respect. He was like, oh yeah, I got you. I'm gonna help you out. And I was like, no, let me help you out. And I realized it was because we were both being generous to each other, but we were also trying to be mindful of each other's space in a positive way. So I really think that it ultimately equals something more positive. I think about something simple like now, you know, all the time when you have to tell kids, like, wash your hands before you eat. There's going to be a lot of kids now, you don't have to tell it. They're literally just going to be more like, I'm just more mindful. So I think that we retain the same thing that we desire, and I think that most of us will desire to integrate again and then just have more mindfulness about like certain things.
Well, I read a book by a doctor on gut and psychology syndrome and how certain tendencies toward cleanliness in the form of, for example, rubbing alcohol or soap application can actually be counterproductive to the cultivation of your body's gut biome. So I think that excessive cleanliness maybe robs people of exposure to certain things that they would otherwise have gotten, like bacteria and viruses and things like that actually keep the immune system active to a higher degree, and sort of like your software updates on a computer. Like if you leave a computer unplugged from the internet for more than 6 months or a year or something, and then you expose it to the internet, you're probably running higher risks than the regular updates.
I got you. That makes sense to me. I think, I feel like, and this to me is when you get to, I think for the most part, and that's why I like agree with a lot of what you're saying, even though I think there's like another side to it. I think what we're essentially talking about is like the ebb and flow of evolution. Because I almost feel like what you're saying is true, but it almost feels like then that's when it would continue to, like evolution would just continue to be what it is, to where whatever we were then stripped of, like it would then eventually there'd be something else introduced into the thing to deal with it, you know.
To me,
the hope would be that it would be done before we all out. I mean, you know, I'm saying arguably, I mean not arguably, but subjectively speaking about just like human life and that kind of thing. But like,
I think the way that we as a human race address the concept of evolution, a good example of it is how we never talk about dinosaurs' evolution.
Okay.
Because they have ultimately ended in extinction, except for a few examples like maybe the alligator or the crocodile or something like that, right? Turtle,
Yeah.
you said?
Turkey.
Turkey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest ones that I learned.
But I think that, I mean, we can't know now what the ultimate result of our actions is, but hypothetically in the future, if we do become extinct because of our own actions, then I don't think that any future species that are cognizant, you know, millions of years into the future, whenever they come back to inhabit the planet Earth, are going to be talking about humans' evolution, because we ultimately caused ourselves to cease to exist.
Interesting, man. That's definitely a big mystery, right now. But it's definitely an interesting thought, though. So this concept of free will, compatibilism, and determinism, like, you know, this is a rabbit hole. Actually, you know what? Let me do this real quick. So the last couple I was gonna read on that social media etiquette list was like, number 5, don't accept friend requests from people you don't know or don't have a desire to talk to regularly. Number 6, ask people nicely to stop including or tagging you unless you're really interested in their content. And these were things I even wrote after like learning myself, like to change some of my habits so that it could be more of a non-overwhelming experience for myself and other people, right? Mute, hit, ignore conversation, or block people who send auto messages like, you gotta see this, send this to everyone you know, send this to 12 people right now in 12 minutes to get 12 miracles, and any other bullshit messages you get that aren't a person taking the time out to engage you in an organic, original, and authentic way.
Is it possible to engage someone in an organic way online?
Hell yeah.
Really?
Cause yeah, and I don't say that. I'm saying hell yeah because.
Because you know I'm saying hell no?
No, it's because I'm thinking I automatically jump to my subjective definition of organic. Like, I say hell yeah because I believe organic is like just being genuine, and of course I'm speaking about my version of genuine, which is like a positive version.
Can a computer be genuine?
Yes, because it's not in the computer. I think it's in the expression of the person.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, if a computer was talking to me and it said something like, "Hi, how are you?" Do you think it genuinely cares?
Does the computer care?
Yeah.
I mean, initially, no. It might be programmed to care about your response if, like, to make a simulated version of caring about your response. If you respond in a way where then it's supposed to be triggered to do something else to keep the interaction going.
So how do I know the difference between that and interacting with a person online?
Oh, you don't. So you either...
So how can one be organic and the other be inorganic?
Because you don't know, but you have, like, reason to trust or believe or not. Like, you know, it's funny you saying this, right? Because I thought about something, and I actually think this is partly true, and I'm actually glad it is. Well, and I'm doing this thing where I'm saying all this stuff, and I gotta name what it is, but it's on my public figure page, right? You know, I engage with a lot of people on it, right? And I've met a lot of new people. And one of the things that I've done, and I do heavily as a regular practice, is I use the Facebook, the ability to boost your posts and to choose your demographic and audience and put it in front of whoever you want to. And the goal is to put it in front of more people that would find it of interest, right? I love it because if I had this in 1997, then I would have been a famous rapper right now, because we had the material, we had the ideas. we just needed to get to the audience, and it was just too much between being a talented person or having something of interest or value or something you want to share, and then sharing it to like the world, right, or to a larger community of people who are finding a tribe, like that kind of thing. So I'm saying that to say, now I love that we have that ability. On my public figure page, I use the ability to put money behind posts to put it in front of people that would be of interest, and I get to choose the interest. I get to be real strategic with it. Now I've gotten really good at it at this point, where almost everything I boost, even with as little as $1, I'm able to like reach a good amount of people and start connecting with people who really are my tribe, right? And so to speak. Now, but at the same time though, there's been times when I'll look at certain responses or certain people or certain profiles and it'll seem suspect. Like it's not a real person, but like it's just an auto-generated thing. That's like a reward for what I'm doing to keep me in the loop.
Yeah, how do you know your brain's not in the vat?
I don't care if it is the point.
Well, you're spending your money though.
Exactly, because there's nothing else to do. I mean, there is something. Let me say it differently. I could do something else, but there's nothing else worthwhile to me. And I'm glad you said it that way, because that, and you know, maybe because this, especially this, the brain the vat thing, I realized like that's a whole, you know, different audience of people that really dig down that hole. Like a lot of people don't spend time there. But when I think about that subject and when I think about like what it is and where I am with it, oh yeah, it's real easy, man. I don't even, it's as much as I love to talk about things, like especially things that are ponderings and philosophical and everything, man, it doesn't matter. Because even if that was the case, or it doesn't matter to me, because even if that was the case, what I realize about my life is that I would still be doing the same things.
Even if they were all like robots that were generated to make you feel better?
Yep. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yes. Here's why, man. Okay, so I'm looking at certain profiles, certain ones I could tell are real people. Like, and I'm, you know, of course I know I'm saying that we can go down a whole lot. How do you really know? But that's the fun of it, because what I'll do is because I'm so much about actually engaging in an authentic way. I was told by a homeboy of mine one day. He said, "Man, when I look at your interactions and your stuff online," he said, "you have this real like analog way." He said, even if I'm just watching you in a video that's pre-recorded, he's like, I feel you in a particular way, and he said, it's like you're bringing the analog to the digital. And I knew exactly what he was saying, because he was one of the people that I grew up musically with, and that, you know, we were in a group together. So I knew what he was saying. You know, essentially he was saying like in the midst of this digital kind of, it could feel cold environment because it's not the normal kind of interaction. You bring like that to it, to where I feel that even though it's in the midst of this environment. So what I do is I interact on a level, and everybody that watches this video, everybody will know, like I interact with everybody on that level. So what's happened is that some of the interactions that I've gotten back, I feel like I have more of a reason to believe they're real people, because it's getting all the way down to like us talking about specific things, like specifics of like whether it's art or life or behaviors, and I'm looking at their responses and I'm like, yeah, like.
So what benefit is there in that interaction?
I mean, the benefit is that I believe that one of the greatest things I could do is build positive relationships with other fellow human beings, you know, and have, you know, positive, fruitful, life-giving or supportive, or, you know, just overall positive, you know, discussions and that kind of thing. But on the flip side of that, though, there's some people that come in my circle that maybe just because of the fact that like it's a like, or it's some kind of interaction, but when I go to the page, it's not much there, and it's just that one profile pic, and it looks like it's been abandoned. And so my theory, if it be true, is that some of this is like, okay, it would be understood that when we're participating in this activity, it's because we're trying to actually get more interactions, and part of that interaction is actually the likes and the, you know, and those kind of things, and the shares. Numbers make a difference to us, and they make a difference to other people, right?
I mean, I'd like to say that they didn't make a difference to me, and I'm trying to actually strive for being in a place where they don't.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is because I think that a digital interaction isn't the same as an actual interaction. It doesn't have the same value. And I think that the more time you spend dedicating yourself to digital interaction, the more time you necessarily have to take away from actual interactions. So in my opinion, given that I think that social interaction is a positive and it's like a necessary aspect of our human existence, I think there's a net loss.
Interesting. And I can understand that. I feel like on the other side, I think the one thing for me is I never look at it as it being a thing that's supposed to replace. Like, it's almost like if I look at it the reverse, like, I mean, except for a time like right now where, you know,
it's both actually right now, supposedly, right? Both. If you're real, then it's both things at the same time.
And I would say I would look at it more from a positive perspective, because if we weren't in these times now and we were experiencing what we're experiencing, we would have some benefit and we would have some like, whoa. Like, there's some people that would just feel, even though they might not have the full sense of completion. I thought about this the other day. I was on a Zoom call and we got in the middle of the conversation and you couldn't tell us that we weren't together. Like, it's just that it's because of how we were relating, not so much the format. It was who we are as people and how we were relating, how we were engaging each other's celebrating of life, how we were empathizing with each other, right, in the moment. And there was a point in the call, and my whole reason for being on this call is that I'm actually a facilitator to help this group to understand the power of creating interactions like this, so that for their larger goal as a group, and this is a spiritual arts ministry, and they just love, they're into arts and they're into, you know, just that kind of thing, and sharing it, showing them how to use this kind of experience to actually create experiences like this to be able to connect with a broader audience and other people who will come into the fold, who they will never meet actually in real life, at least at this point, because they're just on the other side of the globe, you know. And one of the biggest things I've been helping them to do is to be open to and understand that they can bring some of the natural experience and interaction into this environment, and not look at it as a replacing thing, but look at it as something to add on top of the beautiful aspect of being able to connect in real life. Because there are times in real life where we have the ability to connect, and then in between we don't, but we might have a desire to. And the only reason I'm saying this is because we could take this logic and back it all the way up to even something as simple as having phones, period. And I'm not even talking about these phones. I'm just talking about having a phone.
Any phone.
Yeah, like, because you could take the phone conversations. You could be like, hey, like, you could be out in nature instead of talking on this goddamn phone and tell you to meet the person. And for somebody, honestly, during that phone time, that was the deal. It was like, what the hell? This is a
for
setback.
me, it still is.
I can understand it.
When
right?
I'm in the forest, I don't want to be on the phone at the same time, or anything else for that matter. Like,
I get it. What I'm saying is there's somebody who, during the time of the traditional phone being created, saying like, this phone shit is some bullshit, because this takes away from.
It's an example of de-evolution.
It depends on how you look at it, because right now, I don't think that you look at, like, again, the basic phone, like the
wall phone.
I don't think you look at that as de-evolution.
Well, I was going to argue why it was. I mean, Whether I
Okay.
feel that way or not, I think is irrelevant. But one could argue.
Oh, wait a minute. Whoa. I might be afraid of that for a second. What the hell you mean? The way you feel is irrelevant.
Well,
wait a minute,
here's
bro.
what I mean.
That's
Ready?
the whole reason why we have this conversation.
No, you missed it. You missed
Okay,
it.
I got you.
Because if I just argue with it, if I just agree with every single thing you say, then we don't have a back and forth. You know what I mean?
That's
so
not, yeah. But the point is not to agree, is just to be like, yo, how do you actually feel? But you could.
Well, I don't think neither you or I feel a certain way about most things. We just see that there's different. No, hear me out about the phone. Hear me out. Okay, so let's say that you're in a very small, for example, agrarian community or like a herding community or something like that, where everybody knows everybody else. Like the families, they're all intergenerational, living together. The elders are passing on stories to the next generations. It's all like word of mouth. Everybody like has a place, everyone has a function. Like some people gather wood, some people get water, some people kill an animal, some people are mystics, right? They're like, every person has a role in that society. Nobody feels left out, nobody feels estranged. Nobody's like homeless or starving or...
Well, all right, wait a minute, you're going too far.
No, I don't feel like I am, because if you're in a really small community like that, where everybody looks out for each other, that's what I'm talking about. And those communities exist. Obviously homelessness exists too, right? But like, just looking at the example of this very small community, there's no need for a phone in that community, because you can just go over to the person's house and have an interaction in person. So to me, anytime that you do anything other than interacting with a very small community in that type of capacity, it's actually de-evolutionary, because now you're trying to remove a thing that's existed since the beginning of human existence, which is like passing on stories by word of mouth. Because now most of us don't really live in like intergenerational households, and we don't really care what our elders have to say about anything. Really what we care about is likes and shares, you know what I mean?
So how do you feel about a grandmother calling her grandson halfway across the world because his parents moved, and talking to him on the phone and relaying all the beautiful messages of the past? That could not happen, not because of anything more than they don't live in the same village. And the only reason why I ask that question is because I do understand what you're saying, but I think, and I can understand, it's just a different perspective. To me, it's like, I think that the most important thing is keeping the technology, or keeping the thing in perspective. Because sure, it'd be great if we could all just live in one, and arguably, like you're saying, if we stop creating, we stop doing all these things, then we could force ourselves for that to be the focus. And I do agree with you that in some ways, I almost feel like regardless of what we create, it's just up to us to keep certain things in focus, right? If for certain goals.
Do you think that they're in focus right now as like society as a whole, or do you think that certain things have gotten out of focus, maybe like a little too strong, a little too prominent?
I think two things are happening at the same time. I think both things are happening. I think some things we're losing sight on that is of value to us, and then I think our path is allowing us to find new things and new ways of doing things that we would have never known. You take this virtual school thing, for example, and before I go into that, I'm saying this all to say, I think at the end of the day, it's just like, it's ebb and flow. And yes, like you said, with statistics, we could look at some things and be like, hey, with respect to this goal, we're not going in the right direction. But I brought up the traditional phone thing to say, like, somebody you
asked me how I feel about grandma calling and telling me stories, right? You want to know how I feel about it?
Yeah.
To me, it feels like a shame almost, because it's a shame that the story wasn't told in person.
But do you ever have a scenario where it's like, instead of it being a shame, it's just like life works out in a particular way where even pre all of this stuff, we had certain times where just because of the ebb and flow, certain things happened, certain things didn't. And then when you have certain technology, like something as simple as a basic phone, that phone has been used for somebody to call somebody and set up something terrible and do something terrible, or for somebody to say, I'll never have to see you again, we'll just talk, and that might have taken away. But then on the other side, do you ever have scenarios where, like, in your mind, like, where instead of it being like, yeah, it's a shame because that should have happened, it's just like, not like literally the way that life happened. It just so happened to be two human beings were in two different places, and they would have no other way of communicating. But out of this came some amazing passing on of a story or amazing anything, just because we actually had a technology that allowed something that was so common in life as two people for life circumstances not being in the same place, being able to actually communicate and even possibly have a relationship that they would not have had at all. And I ask you that only because, yes, while it has its cons, it just feels like certain things add up like that. And
I think it depends on what you think is valuable. Because you could bring it back to Zoom too. And like if I could have a relationship with a person on Zoom that I would never have met in real life, and that I may never meet in real life, but it's like it's a relationship that's based on authenticity and sharing and caring, but it's exclusively on Zoom. The question that I would ask is, does that have any value actually? Yeah. And the answer that I have is that I don't think so, because my focus is on actual real experiences as far as I can assume that they are real. And that anything else that takes me away from that objective is actually in the wrong direction.
I feel you. Yeah. And like I said, I can understand that. My experience, and it's funny you said that because it makes me think about my experience even like to date now. Mine is the exact opposite, which is like, even in my most recent experience, I would say that the ability to not only converse in a very clear audio way to where I can really understand, feel, and hear the same inflections from a person that I would in person, and with the clarity and that kind of thing. And then at long distances, and then to be able to add the ability for video and that kind of thing at time has allowed me to actually have a connection, actually have like a friendship, and to have connection with people that like, it just,
and that's
I'm great. Like I guess I just fall more on the side of like, what I try to do is I try to look for the pitfalls where it's hurting me, and then what I try to do is take my basic foundation of life and look at like just the small places where it actually helps me to, it adds on to my main goals and what I can do on one level. And so I guess that's when it just comes down to a matter of like, it just depends on, it's not what you have, it's how you use it kind of thing. And I'm not saying it's just simply that, but yeah, I feel like...
Can I interject with something?
Definitely.
Throughout my life, I think it began when I was in high school or so, that we had our first computer. It was pretty primitive. It was like on the desktop thing, real slow, but I had a game called Colonization, where your goal is to land in the boat and then just make colonies and basically either befriend or destroy the native and just keep expanding. Like that's the goal. The goal of the game is to win independence from England. And I spent a fair amount of time playing that game. And during the game, like I had a lot of interactions with a lot of digital interfaces, whether they were like Native American tribe leaders or the French in a different colony or something like that, and they would say something to me, and then I would choose what I wanted to say back to them and stuff. And I spent a fair amount of time doing that. So for me, when you interact with another human being, to me, and I know it's not the same to you, but to me, it's like there's not much more value, or it's negligible between that and playing a video game.
Interesting.
And so I know some people want to spend like a fair amount of their time playing video games, but I'm not really one of those people, but I used to be one of those people, so I can see both of the perspectives.
And I think that's why I feel the same way like you, or at least how I felt, even in this dialogue. It's like I can see both perspectives. If I had, and it made me think about something while you were talking. I used to be a gamer too, and now I'm totally not. And it's really for kind of the same reasons. It's like what's valuable to me now is a different kind of experience. And the funny thing is, in the same amount of time that I may have used to spend gaming, now at least half of that time is still in a digital environment, but actually interacting with my friends. So it's almost like, it's like you said, it's just that there's different and it really comes down to what's valuable to you. If I had the choice in some situations to have, if things couldn't go the way that was maybe the more so, like you say, natural way that we were used to before certain technologies, and if it couldn't happen, and the only thing that I have had was like this other way, this other digital way that was birthed by, you know, our technology and our education and creating new things. If it's this, the digital or nothing, then I choose the digital. Not because I just choose it, because what I've done personally is found a way to be genuine in it and to seek and to work at having genuine interactions with other people. And I would choose, and because I've had, I guess you could say, like, you know, like we're saying, and what's valuable to me, because I've had growth, even, like, not even just like the ability to have some kind of interaction, but actual a growing thing, or even a growing like and this is every day for me, growing relationships with people all over the world just because of that. If it were that versus nothing, because I couldn't do it the normal way, my life has benefited more from being able to have that. You know what I mean? And again, not saying that to say like that is the perspective, but I do understand what you're saying, and it makes me understand, like, yeah, it just comes down to like to what's important to you, and it's more so, and this is my thing. I think ultimately it's not what you have, it's how you use it. I don't think our technology in itself has evolved this, but I do think we have to be very, very important and mindful stewards, because, and this is what this is about, that whole social media etiquette thing. And as I keep writing that, and it's even as just I keep sharing, because it's not so much about a book, it's just about realizing, like, oh, I told somebody a couple months ago, and I've been saying this, like, I feel like when it comes to technology, we are learning how this affects the brain and what kind of relationship they have, the benefits, the pitfalls. I feel like we're learning as laymen and as just people using it, practitioners. We're learning, I think, at the same pace as like the psychologists about like what effect it has on us, because it's here now, and we're just in the midst of it. So all of a sudden, when you have, like what you said, where now you have people now focusing on likes and shares, and then you start to see the anxiety it creates, or the benefit, or whatever. I just feel like we're in the midst of it. I feel like we're just as much scientists and you know, and people.
I think we're the guinea pigs.
Well, if we're the guinea pigs, then shit, the other people, everybody would be the guinea pigs, because who's not in there with us? Like, I mean, maybe there are some people that's like, but yeah, and that's why I like this conversation.
You know who I think is not in it?
Okay.
Mark Zuckerberg.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. You know, it's wild too, man, because I got to tell you something, like, honestly, it's kind of funny. I'm not like a hardcore conspiracy theorist, but like when I was looking at him in the, what was it, like, remember when all that shit happened with Facebook and, you know, the privacy thing and everything? Man, I was looking at him in the court case, man, he actually like a robot. And like, you know.
Yeah, he doesn't show any human
It
emotions.
was kind of like, oh. Now, again, and I came to this conclusion a while back, man. This is my thing. And this is probably like what speaks to the deepest aspect of me, just, I guess you could say, just an optimist at the end of the day, but I try not to be like unrealistic or naive. I'm just in a place where I'm like, even if Facebook is the devil, like even if all this is, I gotta tell you this, because I gotta finish this part because this fits in with this part. So I'm looking at these responses on my public figure page. I know that I'm feel like I know when people are real people, and I'm having fun just having these interactions and practicing, right? Because of this topic we're talking about. But even the ones that I feel are auto-generated, and my theory is that they're kind of getting away with it because to some degree numbers do matter, and I'm not saying they actually like ultimately matter. I'm saying like there are certain videos that I look at where before I look at the video, I look at the likes and dislikes. It is not because I'm resting all my stock in there, but I am using it for data real quick though. And the data is like, with this expression, I know what I'm about to watch based on the title and based on maybe why I searched it. I want to see immediately what other people think about it. And then I wipe the slate clean and then have my own thing, but I'm able to hold the two and they not interfere with each other because I'm looking at it from a business perspective. I'm looking at it from psychological, whatever. So I was thinking like Facebook knows that if some of these are auto-generated likes because they're using old profiles that are abandoned, and so you can easily have that generate thing. Okay, cool. So that's not cool. I would never want that. But at the same time, hey, you can't beat them, join them. I'll use that shit. Because that if I'm putting out something positive and something good, then that means that the real people that I am running into, even if that's enough for them to take it seriously, hey, I'll use it. Because I'm just more of an optimist of like turn everything around to good if it's possible, right? So I'm like, hey, it's all good because I'm still confident that no matter what, my true intentions. Oh, and it's because of this. I told somebody this a long time ago with regard to this. I was like, I really feel there's no replacing for actual human interaction. So I was like, even in the midst of a place where some of this shit might be auto-generated, the real connections that you make, if you are serious about them and you go deep with them, they are going to continue on. It's going to be where even if your profile gets wiped out, and this is what's happened to me, where people come find me no matter where I am because I did the best that I could with my digital interaction, whether it was putting a song out there, whether it was engaging, in a comment section with them. I do my best to make the most of this interaction and inject as much of the things we're talking about into it. And I feel like it has the ability to surpass everything. So yeah, and I've also had fun. Man, there's a person on my personal profile page right now, right, who is somebody who I know because I've had history with them. But like as of recent, their responses have seemed a little weird, right? It seems normal, but there's a little bit of weirdness there. So I've been taking note of it. And then I got a message in my inbox that was kind of like a bullying kind of thing, kind of like almost a threat, right? And it was like a digital threat, like I'll expose you if you don't say. And now I played into it in a particular way where I didn't feed into it, let it fear me, make me fearful, whatever. And that actually had another effect, which I'll tell you about later. And my point being that I haven't received a comment like that, and I've actually started receiving a different kind of comment. Like, man, you really inspire. Like, your work really inspires me. Now, this is still the person under the same profile of a person who I know, and as recent as today, they've said like a few things like, "Wow, like you really inspire me."
The same person who's gave you the digital bullying?
Yes.
You think it's a real person? What's
I literally think it's a real person who hacked somebody else's profile, who was trying to scam me, and because of the way I dealt with it, they could not deny that everything they're peeking on me, they're like, damn, like this dude is not, like and then again, I'm not saying it is true, right? Because this hypothesis, it could be totally off. But what I am saying is, I don't give a damn, because I'm going to live in a world with robots. Anyway, I don't have a choice.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you're talking about basically conflict resolution or trying to relate to a human being when there's adversity present? That's not even my question.
Yes.
That's yes. That's a yes. But my question is when...
The first is just, and I wanted to say this, and I'll give it right back to you. The first is like just staying true to just who I am and my positive intentions. And then if that's the outcome, okay.
I see. I was just curious. It was sort of a tangent and not necessarily a segue, but I was curious, did you have any luck with your diplomacy with the people in Ellicott City?
What you mean?
Last time we were hanging out, and then we parted ways, and the other people came up where you had sort of like a need for some clarification on a certain point about beverage.
Yeah. So now I want to say, okay, I'm glad you asked that. I've seen improvement in the process over the weeks, and it hasn't come from me pushing the issue, and it hasn't come from me doing anything other than being with a smile, with a genuine smile, and with a genuine tone, being like, wow, thank you so much. Like, wow, hey, thank you so much. And every time I notice, it starts to diffuse more and more. And that's with no words. That's literally with just me saying that, and then the interaction, and then moving on. But I've started to notice a difference, though. Because of the fact that, like, and then in that case, man, at the end of the day, like, to be honest, is something else going on there, and it has nothing to do with me. So with that, it allowed me not to feed more into it and to go the other way and to operate off of the principle like, yo, it's kind of hard to stay in a negative place when somebody else is actually showing you over time that that's really not who they are. Now, you can still stay there because you have a story in your mind. I'm not invested in it. Hey, but all I'm going to do, though, is put my best foot forward, and if it makes a difference. So in this case, I literally, as of today, got a couple comments that was like different. And now I'm starting to really believe it's not this person, because this person wouldn't even say things like this. So now I'm on some like, okay, let's keep this going. I ain't afraid of nothing, man, because I don't have a reason to be. If you're going to get me, you're going to get me. Like, but I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself, but to also be like, man, come on with this bullshit. We don't have to live like this. And I don't know your situation. But maybe if I just do my best to try to be as positive as possible, just maybe it might actually change your experience, where maybe you've been dealing with a whole bunch of assholes, and this one person or one of many people is just like, wow, damn, man, like, I know what I was here for, but damn, and then the fact that you came at me one way and I'm actually operating a different way. I just believe that with some people, that has the power to like really fuck you up, but in a positive way, like, damn. And some people, it doesn't matter.
I mean, that's what Gandhi thought, right? As one example, and Martin Luther King and other people like that.
Yeah. So, man, ultimately, though, I was saying that to then say, with that and with these other interactions, I'm determined to use all things to, as much as possible, turn around the good or put good on top of it. So that way, even if that doesn't change the good, somebody else sees it, and then there's more of a collaborative effort, and then that's just it. And to me, for my life, like, that's the only thing that's worthwhile waking up every day to do. Because no matter what the rest of the reality is, like, number one, some of those kind of things make me happy. Number two, I really feel like I'm doing something that would be subjectively positive. And then number three, man, it's almost like what you said about the overthinking thing. I feel like if I go too deep into it, then I'm not actually just enjoying life for the simple and organic pleasures and trying to stay there, move deeper in that direction.
I was just thinking in my mind and juxtaposing two ideas, one of which is to interact with people like that digitally, and the other one would be just going door to door, kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses or something like that, Mormons and stuff. It didn't have to be religious, though, necessarily, but just like a philosopher going door to door, trying to spread some positive vibes or something. I wonder what you would encounter.
Well, I tell you, bro, it's not door to door, but it is definitely neighborhood to neighborhood right now, and street serenades. And that is one of the things, and that's why I agree with you so much, and why I try to live my experience where my goal has been to try to bring more digital eyes to natural experiences. And to say like, okay, there's value in that because I can see how I can be able to bring a natural and organic experience to people who, just because of the serendipity of life, would have no way to actually experience that.
Yeah, they wouldn't even find out about you probably in the first place, right?
True. But then with you and with Blue, I appreciate, like, I remember the first time I talked to Blue, and when we had a conversation about moments in life and connection and the significance of them. And I remember him saying like, yeah, to me, what's more significant in life is like, if you were meant to be in on a particular moment, then you were. If you weren't there, then that's just it. It disappears. You never knew about it, and the sanctity or the significance of it was just that, and I can rock with that too. In fact, it's funny because that's why I can appreciate my buddy saying analog and digital, because I feel that that's who I am with just this other side that also brings that too. Like,
your discussion about Blue brought me back to the idea of determination versus free will, and whether you were in that moment because you were supposed to be or weren't supposed to be, versus thinking about it like, I should have been in that moment, but I made a decision that resulted in me not being in that moment at the time, which was actually a mistake. You know what I mean? Two different ways of looking at it, because the mistake standpoint would be like, I had free will, I chose wrong. And then the determinative standpoint would be that I was where I was and this moment was occurring somewhere else, and that was just, it would have happened that way regardless of how I would have tried to affect reality to the contrary.
Yeah. So all that and more, we're going to chop it up, man. We're going to do another, our next talk. In fact, we'll dig hardcore into that. But this has been a lot of fun, man. And I just, as they say, at the end of the day, I think that the most realistic place that we can be is like looking at as many things as possible first looking at as many things as possible in as neutral of a way as possible first. And you can't do that with everything, but with regard to what we're talking about, technology, that kind of thing, starting there and then being able to realistically, like we say, step back, look at data, look at things, and be able to tell, like, okay, this is the positive of it, this is the negative of it. Be mindful of that. Work as much as we can to keep the negative down. And I guess in some of the cases, like what you're saying, some cases the only way to do that is to
create a balance, maybe.
Yeah,
between the two worlds.
Because of one reason, bro. No matter how we feel, it is what it is. It's not going anywhere. Now, it doesn't mean we have to partake in it, but it does mean, like, in certain ways in life, if we're deciding to, or if we have to for some other kind of reason, then we can at least have a healthy relationship with and a balance with it. Because I could not agree with you more that it is important to have this just as much as it's important to have, I mean, not just as much, but more, and then to use the benefit of that to superimpose, to meet these goals even more in some way. And
just to put the last little bit of perspective in there, don't forget that back in the 1800s, they were trying to bleed people's evil humors when they got sick.
They were trying to do what?
Bleed out evil humors.
Really?
Yeah, like suction cups that they put on people, and they try to bleed people, like just drain their blood if they got sick, because maybe the blood was the reason. Yeah. So not every single thing that occurs throughout human history is to our benefit.
At all. And the only way we know is you have a human brain. The human brain is going to be innovative and creative. In order for us to come up with the better inventions, we got to build the bullshit. And I'm I'm not even saying gotta as in gotta. It's just the way it is.
Or get back to the basics of quiet meditation, thoughtful human interaction, and trying to live a simple but meaningful life.
And this is when I get to the point where I'm like, it's really dependent on like what's important, to people. I feel like instead of having to think of it as either or, it's more like both and. It's more like take the values and the virtues of the things from the past and be appreciative of the now, man. I just strive every day to say, okay, here's the ways where this is really like, ooh, this is a lot. And all right, let's get better with this, and let's keep appreciating and celebrating this, So yeah, man, good convo, bro. Good convo. And I hope you all enjoyed. We're definitely gonna chop it up again. We do this all the time, so thanks for hanging out with us. Perla says, determination is saying, let's see here, let me read a few comments. Determinism is saying, everything happens for a reason. And so what we're going to do, Perla, is the next time Matthew and I come on here, that's going to be the topic there, because we were going to dive into that tonight, and we had fun allowing the conversation to deterministically just flow where it was. Thank you so much, y'all, for hanging out. All right, everybody, we're out of here. Talk to you soon. Peace. Later.